for coming. We're so excited. There are so many people here tonight. And I'm sorry I don't have a microphone, but I don't want to interfere with Dr. Hartse, so I'll just try and talk loud. My name is Sue Strand. I'm the Director of Alumni and Special Events at Olympic College Foundation. Most of you probably know David Emmons. He's right over here. He's my boss. So, yay. This is the first ever event that I think we've done for the Alumni Association in a while. And we have started a lecture series, and we're going to have one outstanding OC professor give a talk each quarter in the year 2017. So this is our kickoff event, so we're hoping it goes well. I have a couple of quick housekeeping things for you, and then we'll get started. Restrooms are in the building directly behind me. So you just go down open the glass doors, go all the way down to the hall, and the restrooms are on the right. There's also some restrooms in the building right next door too. So just so you know, next to the elevator, and the door is on the outside of the building. You don't have to go in the building to access the restroom. On your tables, there's an evaluation sheet. I hope that you'll take the time to fill it out and let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, how we can improve, and if you have suggestions for future talks, we'd love to hear that. You also have a little paper slip. There is a drawing for a door prize, so you can put your name on the slip and we'll pass around a box to collect those in a while. And we also have the brochure about the upcoming events. So you can take this home with you. You'll probably get some notification by mail as each one comes up, but just wanted to let you know about the rest of our series. And I can tell you right now, our next speaker in May is Dr. Bob Abel, who's eating his dinner right there. So Bob will be up in May, so he's observing to make sure this goes well. And then finally, BCAT is here, Bremerton-Kitsap Access TV. I think that's Access TV, yeah, that's right. And we are recording this program, and this little piece of paper is up at the front. This will be rebroadcast 4 times during the next month. So if you really like the show or you want to show it to your friends, please record it and show it to everyone over and over again. And the schedule is here, and that's on a little piece of paper. So those are the housekeeping items. Ruth Ross is over here. Ruth is on our foundation board. She is on the Alumni Association Committee. She is a retired OC Dean of the Library. So something like that. She's got the clipboard, and each row has a clipboard. We'll have you fill that out to get your name and information if you want to give it to us. We'll make sure that you get all the Alumni Association information if you like. And it can be friends of alumni. You don't have to actually be an alum of this college to be on our list. So that being said, I want to introduce our speaker tonight. So she is Dr. Caroline Hartse, and many of you probably know Caroline. She's been a professor here for a long time. She has a Bachelor's of Science in Sociology from Montana State, and she grew up in Missoula. Montana State's in Bozeman, so there you go, just down the road. She's a Bobcat. Montana State Bobcat. I'm a University of Montana Grizzly, but we're still friends. It's okay. Then Dr. Hartse received her master's in anthropology from the University of New Mexico, and she stayed at the University of New Mexico to earn her PhD in anthropology. She's been a professor here at OC in the anthropology department since 1994, and she leads the archaeology field school each summer at the Yama village site on Bainbridge Island, and she'll be talking a lot more about that, of course, in her talk this evening. And it is my understanding that Olympic College is the only community college in the United States that has a field school and a dig site. So I think that's pretty remarkable for a little college here at Kitsap County. So Dr. Hartse has given presentations all over the world about the discoveries that are being found at the Yama site on Bainbridge Island. And she's received numerous grants and awards to continue the work that she's doing there at the field school. So without any further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Hartse.
Thank you very much. And I do want to emphasize that I am the project manager for the Yama project, and that there are a number of people involved, including there is a field school director and instructor. Floyd Aranyoshi has been our field school director and instructor for the last summer and this coming summer, and then Dr. Bob Drolet was the field director and instructor in 2015. So there's a lot of people involved, and as I go through my talk tonight, I'll be explaining that quite a bit. So I chose this title purposely to emphasize about the power of community for a number of reasons. But I'd just like to start by giving an overview about Yama and then the project, Field School, and where we're going with the project. So many of you may be familiar with the site of Yama, and some of you, this may be one of the first times you've really heard very much about it. But Yama was a Japanese immigrant village on Bainbridge Island, and at its peak, there were at least 300 residents who lived at Yama. And Yama is on Bainbridge, and it's more toward the southern end of the island. We don't like to give the exact address or location, but it is down around this area here. It is on Metro Parks land. And I'll be talking about Metro Parks on Bainbridge as they're one of our partners. But the village existed from the 1880s to the 1920s, so it's a very early and one of the earliest, best preserved Japanese villages in the Pacific Northwest. So it developed really as part of the mill on Bainbridge Island. So many of you may be familiar with the history of Port Blakely Mill on the island. And because of the opportunities there for workers, Japanese immigrants came to the area. And at first, they were bachelors, single men who came and settled in a community that we now call Nagaya. And that means a longhouse and for bachelors. And there were other immigrant communities nearby who settled Scandinavian, Hawaiian, and others. And they all worked at the mill. Many of the men worked at the mill. And at one point, this was considered one of the largest sawmills in the world. So if we continue, in the 1890s, in that similar location near the mill, Japanese families came and settled on the steep hillside to the south of the bachelor's quarters. And it was called Yama because of the hillside. And we're not sure that is the official name of the village. We don't think it is, but it's still referred to as Yama as the hillside. What's really interesting and important and what happened is about 1890, a couple came to Yama, and this was Hanjiro and Fuji Kona. And the Konas became very established at Yama. And so by 1900, they had opened a hotel at Yama. So this is a large village, and the hotel was called the Washington Hotel and Restaurant. And what's important about the Konas, and especially with Hanjiro, is he worked at the mill, and he worked as a liaison between the Japanese community and the mill itself. And so the mill owners and Hanjiro Kono got along very well. And so he helped the workers there. He negotiated situations with the owners as well. So he's very influential. And he also, was important in that he decided with others that Yama should be for families. So at this time, in the early 1890s, the bachelors were well known for being quite loud, gambling, drinking, etc. And these were actually, it was in reports that were out of the consulate out of San Francisco. And so he really worked to change Yama, and a lot of the gambling and drinking and prostitution as well moved permanently to Seattle. And then it was a very open community to families. So he's influential in that regard. And his wife, Fuji Kono, she was important as well because she is going to work with other community members and the Japanese Baptist Church in Seattle, and there will be a Baptist church start at Yama, and they were part of that church as well. So he really was influential, as well as she, both of them. And then he left, and she left both in the early 1900s. The mill sold, and the new owners came, and he got along very well with the old owners, and he left with them and took about 20 men from the village with him. So he had been a big influence. The Shigemura family then bought the hotel and restaurant and ran it for a number of years. And a lot of mill workers would come and eat at the restaurant. It was very well known. So then other important founding family were the Takeyoshis, in particular Timagoro and Tomeo Takeyoshi. And they came to Yama in the late 1890s. And they opened a store, a tea garden, an ice cream parlor, a photo studio, and they had other businesses as well. We've been able to learn a little bit about, they were laundry agents for a company in Seattle, and they also had contact with other stores because we know they were selling a particular bacterial culture that is used to make amazake, and it is advertised in Seattle papers. And it's really interesting because then Port Blakely Takeyoshi store is listed as one of the outlets for that particular bacterial culture. So they're very important. And what's interesting here when you take a look is these are pictures of the tea garden. A lot of Caucasians would come to the tea garden. And also the ice cream parlor was extremely popular on Bainbridge and with community members. And then also, again, the far picture in the upper-hand corner is probably, again, in the tea garden. And if you look to the far right of that photo, you will see Takeyoshi taking the photo itself. So they were a very well-known family in the community. Also, another influential member of the community was Kahachi Hirakawa, and he arrived in 1890 at Yama, and he later helped start the Baptist church. And in fact, he later leaves Yama, and he ends up going to the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and he becomes a reverend. He becomes a minister. And he does return to the area, but many, many years later, actually right as Yama was really ending, he returned and he actually took some of the wood from the buildings at Yama, including the Baptist church, and he built another Japanese Baptist church at Winslow at that point. So he's very important and influential as well, though he does leave Yama in the early 1900s. His connection, though, to the Japanese Baptist church in Seattle is very strong. So he's very influential. And then I'm going to mention a businessman who is incredibly important as well to Yama, and that is Masajiro Hariya. And he was really a very interesting and incredibly influential businessman in Seattle and actually on the entire West Coast of both the US and Canada. And he had businesses that he opened not only in Seattle, but Tacoma, Portland, Vancouver, BC, and his company had branches in Japan as well. And he and his salespeople supplied Yama with many goods, and he acted as a kind of labor broker, placing Japanese workers at the mill. He also knew and was very good friends with the Konos, the Takeyoshis, and Hirakawa. And in fact, Hirakawa, when he first came to Seattle, he worked for Hariya at his store in Seattle and then was placed and got a job at the mill through him as well. So he's very important as well in the story of Yama, though he never lived there. And he had a summer home on Bainbridge at Crystal Springs, and many people would come visit there as well. So a very influential businessman, and very strong ties with Yama. So Yama was a thriving transnational community. And what that means is really that people came from Japan and they settled there, and they really combined and mixed together the two cultures. They remained Japanese, but they were also Americans. They forged a unique identity, and they combined different aspects of both cultures. And this included, for instance, that there was a Buddhist temple or community center at Yama. There was the Japanese Baptist church as well. They were near each other, separated by a play field. Depending on the year, there were different language classes offered, Japanese language and culture classes offered. Sometimes they were offered in the church building, sometimes in the temple building. So both were very important in the community. The children went to the Japanese language school and the Japanese culture school, and they also went to the English public school at Port Blakely. So again, this combination of these two cultures. And we know too, based on the fieldwork from the first couple years of the project, that there's a lot of Japanese ceramics, and we brought some samples up front here. You're welcome to come up after the talk and look at those. But they're combining then with, we found, for instance, Fox soda pop bottles, a pop that was made in Seattle at that time. But then there's Kirin beer bottles too. So there's this mix of the two cultures. And also, we know from archival research that the Yama residents were influenced very much by what was going on, not just regionally, but what was going on in Japan, what was going on in the broader US, what was happening in worldwide. And so they are adapting and adjusting to constant changes in their home country from where they came from, and then from the US. So again, this combination of eating many traditional foods, but then Takeyoshis make ice cream, and it's incredibly popular, not only in the community, but with Bainbridge Island residents in general. So very much a vibrant transnational community. So what happened is in the 1920s, the mill closed. And when that happened, the village businesses and homes were dismantled, including, for instance, the Reverend Hirakawa had come back to the area and dismantled some of the buildings and used the wood elsewhere to build communities, houses, the Baptist church in Winslow, and the site became overgrown. The property was later acquired by Bainbridge Island Parks. And I really do like the contrast of these two photos to look at Yama and then today, and how much the Pacific Northwest climate really reclaims the land. Probably many of you have heard about the project, perhaps through local media. I'm highlighting some of the media attention from 2016. Yama is a significant site. It is of local, national, and international importance, and the project has attracted a lot of attention from both media as well as academic researchers. And this has been a really exciting year in that the project really came to the attention of World Archaeology, and I was invited to present about the project in Kyoto this summer, and it was a really wonderful opportunity to connect with scholars from the US, Canada, Japan, and other countries, and we are now forming a group to really focus on research of transnational Japanese communities. And so now we have research colleagues in Japan who are researching individual families who were at Yama and looking at their lives in Japan. And we also are able then to connect and look at similarities in logging camps. So a colleague in Vancouver, BC, Bob Muckle, has been doing work at 1920s Japanese logging camps just outside of Vancouver. And so we're going to be able to compare a lot of what we're finding for artifacts and other materials. So it's a really exciting time. And again, there are many local sites as well, the Mukilteo Japanese Gulch site and others. So we're being drawn together and able to pull together a lot of resources and information and look at these patterns of immigration and adaptation and what's happening, not just on Bainbridge, which is important, but how all of these communities and experiences are connected for Japanese immigrants and Japanese communities. And then, of course, we were on King 5, which was really great in that I was at the conference at the time and I hadn't even seen the video clip of that, and everyone there had already seen it. So it was kind of interesting to say, I'm going to present on this. They're like, oh, we've seen that already. I was like, I haven't even seen it. So it was great, and our local media as well, Bainbridge Island Review, and the previous summers, Kitsap Sun has been very active as well in coming out and sharing research findings with the public. And then North American Times as well, the Japanese newspaper in Seattle, has been interested and run stories. So how did the project start? In 2014, anthropologists from OC began to meet with a number of community organizations and formed a task force to bring forth this story of Yama. And I do want to emphasize all of the partners. The Bainbridge Historical Museum, Bainbridge Island Metro Parks, of course they are owners of the land, Bainbridge Island Historic Preservation Commission, Kitsap History Museum, Bainbridge Island Japanese American Community, and the University of Washington Berkeley. And I'll talk about each of those a little bit. What I want to emphasize is the importance of collaboration, and this is a collaborative relationship that we developed and to define the Yama project. And I want to emphasize this could only happen by working together and doing this together. We could not have done this alone, OC alone, or the museum alone, or any of these organizations alone. So working together has been very, very important to do that. And again, Olympic College has played a role in that in bringing together people, but those organizations wanted to come together as well. So it's been a very positive collaborative experience. Out of the project became the emphasis that there should be an archaeology field school and that this should be at the heart of the project. And the field school is really giving our students here at OC an opportunity to learn hands-on about community and about history and archaeology. And this is very unique. This is a full immersion 12-credit field school that we have in the summer. This is unusual at a community college, very much so. It's accessible and it's affordable. And there are many field schools offered, but they are typically at universities or sometimes at research institutes, and the cost is very high, and often students have to travel a great distance to go to those. It may be Oregon, it may be in Alaska, it may be in the Southwest, but all of that costs a lot, and our students typically are not in the position to do that. And so this is really exciting to offer and be offering a full immersion 12-credit field school that's right here, available, accessible, and affordable. And I really want to emphasize affordable because the foundation, OC Foundation, is making available a number of scholarships this year for field school students. So if you know anyone interested, have them contact the foundation, and I do have flyers up front about the field school, including that phone number for students who are interested, and again, scholarship money is available. So it's very exciting to be able to offer the field school, and it is again at the heart of the project. So in the field school, students are learning critical job skills and also life skills that I'll talk about here in a minute. They learn survey, excavation, artifact analysis, processing, cataloging, critical thinking skills. They're really learning the methods and techniques and skills they need to work in the field of archaeology, historic preservation, history, and a number of related fields. And students need this in order to be able to get employment in the field. So it's very exciting to be able to offer it to often our students who just do not have the opportunity to attend a field school that's full-time. So a lot of schools will do like a 1-week field school or 3 or 5 days, but this is 8 to 5, Monday to Friday, 8 weeks intensive. So yeah, it's really exciting. Also, students are learning other skills as well, and that is analyzing data, writing reports and papers, and presenting those. And number of topics, and I've selected a number of individuals who we went to the 2016 Northwest Anthropology Conference in Tacoma, Washington. It's a regional conference, and this coming year will be in Spokane, but this was exciting. And again, because of the Olympic College Foundation, we were able to secure some funds so that myself as project manager, Floyd Aranyoshi, the field school director and site director, and 6 students could go and present their work and findings. And that was exciting because, again, it's really connecting students with other archaeologists, other students, cultural resource management firms that do hiring of individuals in the field, tribal consultants, so all kinds of people are at the conference, so it's a wonderful professional experience for our students. And students researched and presented on a number of topics, including the religion at Yama, the different structures and features, where the bachelor's quarters were in relationship to the village itself, ceramic analysis, glass analysis, so really doing professional work through the class and then being able to present at the conference. So that was an exciting opportunity as well and a great experience. So I want to emphasize as I talk about the field school and 2015 and 16 is that it's really about teamwork and about community, so that all of the partner organizations involved have been critical, and all individuals have played critical roles and continue to. So some people have retired and moved on, students have graduated and moved on, but all of the different individuals have been important, and the project could not have happened with everyone who is involved. So that's why I like to emphasize I'm project manager and I'm giving this talk, but I'm not the person who made it all happen. I'm one part of a bigger team and bigger group that is making this happen. Also, in addition to our partners who have been very generous in terms of grants, in-kind, and direct support, also the organizations that we have received different donations and grants from as well, including Bainbridge Island Community Foundation, Bainbridge Island Rotary, Cultural Resource Consultants, the Bainbridge Island Parks Foundation, Bainbridge Island History Museum, Olympic College Foundation, and Olympic College, especially I'm emphasizing social science and humanities. And thank you to Eleanor Legman for all of her work on budget and ordering things. So I can't thank her enough, and she's not here tonight. She's wonderful. So all of our generous community and partners, again, have made this field school and project possible with their support. So again, I want to emphasize the importance of community. And so I want to highlight a few things. We started the field school officially in 2015. And in that year, year one I call it, students and crew had surveyed nearly 15% of the 7-acre site, which is Yama. And they also, of course, established the grid system to do that. They recorded a number of features and also recorded 2,500 artifacts or partial artifacts. And at this point, I just want to explain very briefly that the work is overseen in the sense by the Washington State Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. So each year the field director has to get an excavation permit to do the work. That is not me, I'm the manager, I don't have to sweat that, but they get to do that. And that's important so that students are really experiencing professional conditions to work in the field of archaeology. So understanding there has to be a permit in order to continue the excavation and research each year. Also, the University of Washington Burke Museum is one of our partners, and they are going to act as the repository for all artifacts. They have particular cataloging procedure that must be followed. And so again, students are trained and experiencing that in the lab here at OC. So a number of days a week they're up in the field on Bainbridge, and a couple days a week they're here at the college and on Bremerton campus processing and cataloging those artifacts. All of this guided by both the state office and the Burke Museum. So again, we are offering our students here professional experience of this field school that is extraordinarily rare at community college level. So 2015, there was a lot of work and a lot of work that went done in terms of student work analysis, the field director, and the community. In in 2016, it was a very busy year as well, and students and crew continued surface survey, reanalyzed some of the quadrangle surveyed in 2015, and did some limited shovel tests. And I do want to talk about very briefly these brick structures here on the lower right. And in 2015, many of these were documented. In 2016, there were more. And they have been analyzed and studied by one of the former field school students who is now one of the crew supervisors, Jean Hanna. And there are a number of hypotheses concerning what these are. So if you have some, do share them after the talk. We have decided, the field director has decided there is one explanation that he wants to really research more this coming field season, and that is that it may have been a storage unit in the floor of the houses. And because we have right now about 15 of these, but we're not sure, there's no evidence of burn marks or water marks on them. There are many other hypotheses, but that is something in 2016, a number of those continued to be found, and there's still questions as to what they are. 2016, the crew and students surveyed nearly 40% of the site. They recorded features and recorded approximately 2,700 artifacts or partial artifacts. And again, very similar patterns to 2015 findings, but a lot of evidence of shells, food, ceramics, metal, parts of shoes, parts of toys. So anything really that you would find in a community, and we do have some samples of some of artifacts and partial artifacts up front. So it was a very busy year, like the first year as well. So again, in the field school, the students are learning systematic collection techniques. The location of an item is as important as the artifact itself. They're learning in the lab how to process, clean, prepare the artifacts, photograph. The crew can talk about this, especially at the end. Every single item has to be assigned numbers, cataloged, and again, following very strict protocol through the entire process. So the emphasis on the systematic recording, record keeping is very critical, and again, following very carefully the guidelines set out by the Burke Museum, which they are a nationally accredited museum. So some of the exciting things that happened in 2016 was that based on the field research done, the students and crew were able to locate the road, that ran through this thing. The community, which is right here, this is the town road. And they were also able to locate Old Fort Road, Ward Hill Road that ran here. And they also were able to find where the bridges would have been. So that was a really exciting aspect to 2016. And again, beginning to learn more about the water system at the community. In 2015, that was also a focus, and again, more information was able to be documented because a larger amount of the site was able to be surveyed. And again, finding patterns reflecting the transnational community. Just as an aside, this map was by memory of Chia Shigemura, who was one of the daughters of the Shigemura family who bought the hotel from the Konos. And this is from 1985. Andrew Price had interviewed her, and this is her memory of the community when she was a young woman, young girl. And this helps the crew and students very much when they're out in the field. Yeah, there was a haunted house, and there's some stories about that. Yes. No, it's really interesting. But the kids talked a lot about that haunted house. Okay, so members of the community and groups have visited the site since the beginning of the project, both in 2000 and here is 2016 as well. And many have learned a lot about Yama, and many are surprised by what they learn. They're surprised by the size, that there is a hotel, there's the takeyoshi store, the tea garden, all of the other businesses, barber shop, etc. And just the size of it. And what's really great here is actually Floyd Aranyoshi, our field site and director, is taking the group through, and the blue tape is where the road ran, the village road. Now what's interesting, we don't see remnants of the road because it was a wooden road, but my colleague in Vancouver, Bob Muckle, who was working at the logging camps, Japanese logging camps from the 20s, amazingly, their road at the logging camp is still intact in part. So there's photos that he's been able to share that shows what the road would have looked like. It would have been a wooden road. So the crew and students were able to determine that. What's exciting about this is more than the students themselves get to learn about the community and the site, and the students are helping in public archaeology. So this is a really, again, another important skill for students because they get to share what they're learning, and they get to teach community members the importance of archaeology in terms of systematic recording and record keeping, following protocol. And again, this is another critical job and life skill that our Olympic College students are gaining as a result. So it's a really wonderful component to the project. Students as well each year get to experience other kinds of cultural exchanges. And in 2016, Suquamish elder and expert basket maker Ed Carrier visited the site twice. He's extremely interested in Yama and the site. And he also had invited students to his home to learn more about basket making for the Suquamish. But Ed also was recently in Japan studying Ainu basketry. They are an indigenous people of Japan. And I can't say a lot except you'll be learning more about that in the next few weeks, because I think he and Dale Crows will be publishing something in a Suquamish newsletter about his work. But it's very exciting, and for 2017 as well, we want to continue the cultural exchanges, and Bainbridge Island Japanese American community members will be spending some time with the students this coming summer. So that is another great 2017 happening. So in 2017, the goal is to complete the site survey, do some limited excavation and test pits, of course analyze and process artifacts, and then begin to work with partners in determining the protection and then curation of the site, what should happen at that point. The collection this coming fall then in 2017 will go to the University of Washington Burke Museum, so we'll be working closely with our liaison there to have that happen. And in addition, Bainbridge Island History Museum will be able to use some of the artifacts in displays and exhibits at their museum. They'll be working closely with the Burke. So again, the partnership and collaboration that's so critical. And then the collection will be available for scholars to work with, analyze, and study at the Burke Museum, which is exciting because the Burke also houses the collection from Japanese Gulch from Mukilteo. So the Burke is really an integral part of this in bringing together a broader number of early historic Japanese sites, their artifacts, and having that access for researchers. Also, I wanted to emphasize that in 2017, some archival research will continue. Both English and Japanese language are important sources, but especially Japanese language sources, 2016 have been very important. The North American Times is one Japanese language newspaper that we have begun to look at, and I need to thank Etsuko Evans, our Japanese language researcher, who has been wonderful in the research, and also the writings of Kyun Okina are very critical to understanding the culture and time period and placing Yama, the artifacts, and the field work in a broader context. And I just want to mention very briefly about Kyun Okina. He is a Japanese writer who lived in Bremerton in the early 1900s. His autobiography or his writings of his life are only available in Japanese. There are 10 volumes, is that right? 10. So ETSCO has looked at the second volume, which focuses in when he lived here. And he went to Union High School. So our partners, Kitsap History Museum, has actually sent some photos of the high school years. He has some in his book. But what is interesting about him is he describes a point where he went, because he was learning English at the high school, he went with Union High School Bremerton students on a boat ride to Pleasant Beach on Bainbridge. And they went for a celebration for the day, and he recalls walking some distance and coming to a Japanese community on a hillside. And he describes it briefly and talks about some of the people, and I won't go into great detail at this point about that. But it's interesting, we think it was Yama, but he never states that. But we're very interested, and recently a Japanese language professor in Wisconsin is writing a book about his work, so I've got to get that on interlibrary loan. So thank you to the OC Library for all the interlibrary loan work that you do for us. So it's exciting to be able to access and look at the Japanese language sources, and again, to have a Japanese language researcher as part of our project, and it's such a critical part. So I wanted to end here toward the end with talking about the power of community and emphasizing it again. And I want to emphasize that the past and the present are intimately connected, and that Yama is the beginning of rich, evolving, and enduring Japanese-American culture of Bainbridge Island. And the study of Yama is critical to our understanding of the past and the present. And so up in the far left-hand corner is Yama, and on the right-hand corner today is Bainbridge Island community at the Mochi Festival that's typically held in January. And down below is Port Blakely Cemetery, one of the graves of one of the Takeyoshis, the brother of Tamagoro. And the Port Blakely Cemetery is just within a couple miles of Yama, and many of the residents from Yama are buried there, some. And then to the lower right is the Japanese American Exclusion Memorial on Bainbridge, which is, of course, focused on our remembrance of what happened with internment in World War II. And I wanted to emphasize the power of community, that the Japanese community has been on Bainbridge since the 1880s, and they have remained very powerful and strong and influential and important in multiple ways in the community. And so I thought that is very important to emphasize at this time and as we look at the power of community in the past and today. And I would like to end with what ETSCO always reminds me, Anko Chishin, which is to learn new things from old. We today, we are the scholars of yesterday. So thank you very much. If you would like lots of sources, please let me know. I have long bibliography. And I also have a lot of acknowledgments. I cannot list everybody, though very quickly I will say Floyd Aranyoshi, who is unable to be here tonight, to thank him. David Davis is here, one of our crew chiefs, Dr. Robert Drolet, who is retired from OC and who was integral in starting the project as well. Etsuko Evans, our Japanese language researcher. Donna Flieger, over here. Also Jean Hanna, one of our field supervisors. David Emmons and the OC Foundation, all of our partners, all of our sponsors. And there's a lot of other people I am going to forget and not be able to name everyone, but so many different people on campus and, again, departments on campus have been so very, very important. So I want to acknowledge and thank everyone. Again, this is a team effort and a community effort, and it is about everyone coming together and making this possible. And so with that, I do want to end and see if there are any questions. And I'm happy to answer, or also have some of the crew and EDSCO answer. So. Bob.
Did you find a garbage dump?
So I will repeat the question because of the film. So did we find the garbage dump? I don't know if we found the garbage dump, but there have been definitely some garbage pits found, and some small ones behind houses. One was test excavated. And then I think the crew can talk a little bit more to that as well, but they've been looking at the hotel, behind the hotel. But there have been some, and again, a couple test pits dug to see what's there. Yeah.
What's the relationship, or at least what's known of the relationship between Yama and the Japanese agricultural community on Bremerton?
Well, that's interesting, and that's an area that we're starting to look at more. We know that there was a farm right by Yama that helped supply some of the vegetables. So some of the writings from Chiya Shigemura talk about that. And then there was also the dairy, Peterson's Dairy. They were not Japanese American, but one of the brothers of Takeyoshi did work there. And then it appears that some people from Yama did move out onto the island. So I don't know if it was a really close continual relationship in terms of the distance among some, but we do know that there was a small, described as kind of like a farmer's market that would be at Yama. And that is an area that we don't know who those particular farmers were. So in that regard, that's an area of research that we need to look at more. And I do know that some of the families, again, left the community and settled out on the island and began farms. But we'd like to trace more individual families. So if you have information, no, let me know, because we're always looking for sources and information. I don't think I repeated that question, but all right. Next, here and then here.
So my question is, since many communities bury their loved ones in a church close to home, I'm wondering if you identify grave sites.
Oh, there are many grave sites at Port Blakely Cemetery. Some are, the gravestones are in Japanese, not at Yama itself, but within a couple miles is the Port Blakely.
Do you think they can make
went
that?
out.
I'm just wondering, because a couple miles seems like a long way for families to go to a grave site. So I'm just curious whether you think you might uncover it.
No, we don't think we will, and I know in talking with EDSCO, if some families may have done cremation. We think that cremation may have occurred in Seattle. We're still trying to research that. It's interesting, there's early crematories in Seattle. I found ads for them, but to find records concerning them is a little bit harder. But we do know, based on visiting the cemetery, I have several photos of grave sites. Many are in Japanese. And so it does appear that that would have been one of the primary places, and we do not expect to find any human remains. And if we did this, the work would stop immediately and the state needs to come in, but there's been nothing like that found so far. Yeah. Yeah, Bob.
Could you talk a little bit about the National Register status?
Well, as far as I know right now, okay, so there's a question about National Registry status. So part of the project's goal has been to submit to get the site listed on National Registry. And it was resubmitted by Floyd Aranyoshi about a year ago, and he is still in contact with the state. And as far as we know, it is still in transition, I guess would be the word I would use. And we've got to follow up. You know, Floyd Aranyoshi is the contact, and he has been working with the state. I don't want to go into a bunch of things about state offices, but they did have they did have a major change of personnel, and so he's working with them. Yeah.
So there's still an effort to put it on.
Absolutely. Floyd Arnyoshi resubmitted all, he had to redo and resubmit in new forms that the state office had.
And that'll, once it's on the register, then it'll be a protective measure, right?
Yes, right. And once it's on the registry, it will be protected measure. Yes, it will be, and that is something that, again, as we've met on the task force, we meet quarterly, we discuss, and typically then the field director, Floyd Arnyoshi, follows up with the state, but that is still in process.
Do you have any information about what caused the community to disband and move away?
It was when the mill closed. So why did the community disband? I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to repeat the question. I was told to ignore the camera, and I really am. So I forget to do that. All right, so the mill closed in the 20s, and that was really one of the key employers and sustaining the community, and the community had been shrinking some because the mill would close and then reopen, or close and reopen with a smaller workforce. And so once it closed for the final time, the families then left, including the Takeyoshis were probably one of the last to leave the community. And so that's why, yeah.
Caroline, have you found any remnants of like musical instruments or anything, and what the life might have been like at that time?
So the question was about remnants of musical instruments. To my knowledge, there have not been remnants of musical instruments found. However, we do know from archival sources that there were Japanese culture classes, that theater was put on, Japanese theater, and that there were teachers from Japan who would be there, who were teaching cultural elements. So there were some different kinds of arts going on, but in terms of finding parts of musical instruments, none that I know of, and if any of the crew know anything else, let me know on that one. They're all shaking their heads back there, no. So it's an interesting question, yeah.
Do we know if the residents of Yama went on to set up the farms on Bainbridge Island?
So the question is, do we know if the residents of Yama went on to set up farms on Bainbridge Island? We know some did, but we know some also left, and of course with internment, some did return and some did not. And so that is something we've traced. Some of the families, there is still a family on Bainbridge, the Nicows, and I know Kay's family had done farming. Her husband was from Yama as well. It's a mix. We also know this, over a 40-year period, there were lots of people coming and going. And so it's really to focus in and track people can be challenging. We know a lot about the main families, but from the research ETSCO and I have been doing, and ETSCO has been looking at a lot of the Japanese newspapers, there are lots of ads for workers to leave one mill to go to another mill, or to go and work in a cannery, or to move somewhere else and work. So we think people are moving around a lot. And so it's sometimes hard to trace, did they return to the island? And so that's, again, a big area of research we still are needing to look into. But some did, but not all. Yeah. And then some opened businesses elsewhere, and a lot went up to Vancouver. It's just amazing. People, we forget, I think the age we live in, we think we're the only ones who really travel and move around. And it's amazing. People were moving back to Japan and working or doing, and then coming back. And so we know by some of our records about that, but we haven't been able to trace large numbers yet. Yeah, but that's a great question. Any other questions? Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, not to get off topic, but I was wondering how many of the families do we know ended up in an
So yes, if you go to the exclusion memorial, so not to get off topic, but where how many of the families were interned and where were they interned or incarcerated? If you go to the exclusion memorial on Bainbridge, and I highly recommend it, is you will go and you will see all of the names of all of the families. And we have been able to go through and you will see Takeyoshi's, you will see Hirakawa, the Reverend Hirakawa was the Nakaus, several of the families' names are there. So I did not do an count, except there are a % of names that are from Yama. Now they were not living at Yama at the time, of course. And then internment was at Mazinar and Minidoka. So there is, and we can trace that. And I'm actually working with federal archaeologists at some of the internment camps, and there are also a number of archaeologists doing work at those camps. So I've been in contact with them. But Bainbridge Island Japanese American community has extensive information on all of the families and where the internment was, and still do memorial every year. And I highly recommend going to visit the site. It's a few miles from Yama. It's a couple miles from the cemetery. They're all, right connected, so to speak. And it's very well worth going. It's a very moving, reflective place to be, and very important. Thank you for that question. Yes?
Hi. In your best world, what would the Yama site be like in 25 years?
Wow. In my best world, what will the Yama site be like in 25 years? All right, I'm going to look at the crew for that one, because I'm thinking, that's a great question, because this came up at our fall task force meeting, and we agreed we're going to talk about it again at the next one, because we're just starting to talk about what should happen, and what part of it's going to be driven by parks, and especially to the Japanese American community and the History Museum. And so we're beginning to all talk about and propose different models and options. I know early in the project it was proposed to develop interpretive trails, interpretive area, but then there's concern about protection. So I don't know on that, stumped me, I have to admit. And I'm looking at the crew and supervisors. And what is your vision in 25 years? Dave's looking around.
I would like to see some kind of interactive, protected site, but an interactive site for the public, because having walked every inch of that ground up there, there's a special reverence to the site because of the story behind it, and the fact that it's one of maybe the only place left that is the very first and earliest example of what it means to be a Japanese American. And so something that special, I don't think should be just left to completely grow over. As archaeologists, we always like to leave something for future generations and technology that's going to come down the road. But to deny the public access to this site and this story, I think needs to be shared. And I think it's in a great location on the island. And like she said, it's going to depend on money, and so once again, it's going to depend on community.
Yeah, I think that's good to emphasize. It will come from the community. It will be a community effort and decision. And I know that the community partners are very much interested and concerned, but it is a collaborative process. And I have learned collaborative processes take time, and they don't always fit in budget years easily at all. But it's important to remember that and to allow that collaboration to happen. Yeah. So that's a really great question. And I will pose that to the task force at our next quarterly meeting.
I have another question.
Oh.
Going on with that topic, is it possible to potentially do a partial restoration of part of the site to help with an interactive?
Well, there's not, the question was about partial reconstruction of the site, or the museum has talked about doing some kind of reconstruction, but not at the site itself. And then in and of itself, the site, there are no buildings left.
Right.
You know, there's terraces and there are the brick structures and water tank and some structures like that. But I do know that some of the people at the museum have talked about different kinds of possibilities. But again, away from the site. That's a fairly popular practice in archaeology now, is to do replicas of different sites. And again, those ideas are just beginning to be talked about, and long time planning and processing and finding funds.
I understand. My
Yeah.
mother is both an archaeologist and a geologist.
Oh.
So I get the time.
Yeah. Oh, there were hands up, so I'm sorry, whoever.
Would the residents of Yama been included in the U.S. Census?
Yes, we do have census records. Oh, were the residents of the Yama included in the census? Yes, there are census records, and so they are included. Yes, yeah, yeah.
You may have just answered it, but what kind of record exists about who the residents of Yama were?
Well, census, though, that doesn't, the records that exist about the residents. So the census will have names. So sometimes the early census just say Japan, you know, like Japanese 1, Japanese 2. And we are looking at other records, including city directories and county directories, but we're finding that a lot of times Japanese are not listed. So Port Blakely will have a pretty large population, but when you actually count the names in the book, there's missing a lot because they are not white, and they're excluded. There's also records from the Japanese consulate out of San Francisco, at least in 1891 census, and that also included where individuals came from in Japan, and so I've shared that with the Japanese researchers in Japan who are very interested in researching those particular individuals. And Jean is going to add.
And I've been doing some research at the special collections, which is where the original papers that were found that kind of began the whole look at Yama. And I have found names of the Japanese in various parts on payment records for the Fort Big Blakely bill, on some bonds that were purchased. So several things like that. So we have some new names. Carolyn doesn't actually know that yet.
Well, I know it now.
I just found those a couple weeks ago, so I just haven't got them yet. So we do have some names from the Fort Blakely Mill records.
Which is a great source, and there's 100 boxes of those. And we're really grateful. Jean is working there at Suzalo.
I have a question. Early in the presentation, you mentioned a labor broker based in Seattle. What do we know about that workforce, the source of that? Are these people from mainland Japan, or are these?
So
how does a labor broker gather manpower at that time? Do we know what was the source?
So, do I need to repeat the question? Okay. He's okay. So.
Sorry, two hats today.
Yeah. So the question was about Hariya as a labor broker and where is he getting his labor? And Etsuko, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'm really nervous, so.
There's no camera.
There's no camera.
Well, I don't know. How should I start? So originally they moved, immigrants here, right? So the same area, the people, they are, how do you call that?
Kind of a chain migration or immigration.
So, but about the Hariya, I'm not really sure I should say or not, but so in Seattle, how he made the money, because he was really trusted man for processing prostitution, prostitute.
Sorry, I was just having a conversation between
So,
them.
that, thank you. So, the older prostitute, so he collected all the prostitution money. So that's how he made money.
No, he actually was not. So one thing, no, I need to clarify that. So he actually was not a pimp. No. It's more complicated than that. So he actually owned a business, and he had like a safe in his business, and he was actually keeping the money that they made so their pimps would not take it from them. No, I was really it's both Etsuko and I read the history book. Etsuko read the Japanese version. I read the English translation. So
Maybe someone translate wrongly. Right.
yeah. So,
I think we have another presentation.
No. So you may want to finish.
In order, actually he mentioned that he was
Broker.
Go ahead.
A
broker.
broker.
Hariya started making or importing all the clothes. So the girls need clothes. So that's how he started. That relationship between Hariya and all the prostitution. Prostitute, I should say.
I'm just going to amend the question. Did this labor broker provide any other labor besides prostitution? Because that's actually
No,
what I was thinking.
he was providing labor to different mills. And he also had all these businesses, and he was supplying a number of like logging camps. And he had an entire several salesmen who would travel and take orders and ship out. And by the way, I'll have to add, he was a strong member of the Methodist Church in Seattle.
And I was really thinking more about the mills.
Right, and he did also, he actually supported the Reverend Hirakawa. When Reverend Hirakawa went to the Moody Bible Institute, Hariya would send him money every couple months. He also had a very close relationship with Kono, and Hariya was a businessman who had connections with several different men and mill bosses, and he would do these kinds of deals and work. So he was president of several banks in Seattle. And he had, again, businesses up and down the coast and in Japan. So he built up to quite large. He did lose it all during the Depression and returned to Japan and died broke. But Etsuko may want to add a little more, but we didn't talk before this presentation, obviously.
In Japan, Hariya get national award by government at the time. So he died maybe 40, but he had a name.
All right, well, that was an interesting question. Can anyone top that question?
We'll have one more question.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it up.
Has LiDAR been employed on the site? LiDAR?
Not to my knowledge.
Side scanning sonar.
There are two LiDAR taken, one just I think last year, but it's not small enough space for it to be useful for our purpose. I don't remember all the technical words for LiDAR, but it doesn't go down to a small enough amount.
Before we do wrap up, I do want to invite people. First of all, several of the crew are here, as well as Etsuko. And we have some teaching artifacts, artifacts that came from the site that you're welcome to come up and look, and partial artifacts and handle. And there's also information, a really great, our communications office did a field school brochure. So if you know anyone who may be interested, please pick one up. I know everybody loves the web today, but paper still matters and works. And there's, of course, speaker series information here from the Olympic College Foundation. But do feel free to come up. And I do want to, again, emphasize and thank the Olympic College Foundation for supporting this and the project and the field school.